I came home early from my business trip to Phoenix and found our HOA president, Linda Morrison, sitting way too close to my husband on our living room couch with her hand on his thigh. My name is Marcus Chen, and I had been living in the Riverside Meadows community in Sacramento, California, for exactly 4 years when everything went sideways. The development was one of those modern suburban neighborhoods with strict rules about lawn maintenance, paint colors, and where you could park your car. I worked as a software consultant, which meant frequent travel, while my husband David managed a small accounting firm from home. We had what I thought was a solid marriage, the kind where we finished each other's sentences and rarely argued about anything more serious than whose turn it was to take out the trash. Linda Morrison had been the HOA president for 3 years running. She was 52 years old, divorced twice, and had the kind of personality that made every conversation feel like a negotiation you were destined to lose. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled in that suburban soccer mom way, and she wore yoga pants like they were formal business attire. Most residents tolerated her because she kept the neighborhood looking pristine, but there was always an undercurrent of resentment about her power trips and arbitrary enforcement of rules. The scene I walked into that Tuesday afternoon should have been innocent. David and Linda were reviewing some paperwork, ostensibly about the upcoming HOA board elections. But the body language was all wrong. Her hand lingered on his leg just a second too long when she saw me. David jumped up like he had been caught doing something inappropriate, which made my stomach drop. "Marcus, you are back early," David said, his voice pitched higher than normal. He ran his hand through his dark hair, a nervous habit I knew well. Linda stood up smoothly, collecting her papers with practiced ease. "We were just discussing David's candidacy for the board. The election is next month, and I think he would make an excellent addition to our team." Her smile was perfectly calculated, not quite reaching her eyes. I set my luggage down by the door. "I did not know you were interested in joining the board, David. It just came up recently," he said, not meeting my gaze. "Linda suggested it might be good for us, to be more involved in the community." Something felt off, but I could not put my finger on exactly what. Linda left shortly after, reminding David to review the materials she had brought over. When the door closed behind her, I turned to my husband. "What was that really about?" David shrugged, moving toward the kitchen. "Exactly what she said. Linda thinks I would be good on the board. They need someone with financial experience to review the budget proposals." I wanted to believe him. We had been together for 8 years, married for 5. David had never given me a reason to doubt him before. But that hand on his thigh kept replaying in my mind like a video on loop. Over the next week, I noticed changes. David started dressing better when he knew Linda was coming over, which happened with increasing frequency. They always had legitimate reasons to meet, always had paperwork spread across our dining room table, but the way they interacted set off alarm bells I could not ignore. Linda would laugh at David's jokes a little too enthusiastically. She would touch his arm when making a point. And David, my usually reserved husband, seemed to light up whenever she was around. I tried talking to my best friend Kevin about it. We met at our usual coffee shop downtown, a small place called Brew Haven that made the best cappuccinos in Sacramento. "Maybe you are reading too much into it," Kevin said, though he looked skeptical. "David loves you. Everyone knows that." "Then why do I feel like something is happening right in front of me?" I stirred my coffee absently. "Why does he suddenly care about HOA politics when 6 months ago he complained about how petty the whole thing was?" Kevin leaned back in his chair. "Linda Morrison has a reputation, My neighbor dated her brother, and apparently she went through a phase after her second divorce where she made a hobby of pursuing married men. Said it made her feel powerful or something. That information settled into my chest like a stone. You think she is targeting David? I think Linda does not do anything without a reason, and getting an ally on the board who owes her something would be very much her style. Kevin took a sip of his drink. Be careful, Marcus. Women like her know how to manipulate situations. I decided to pay more attention. That evening, I overheard David on the phone in his office. I was not trying to eavesdrop initially, but when I heard Linda's name, I stopped outside the door. No, Marcus does not suspect anything, David was saying, his voice low. He got home early last week, but I told him we were just working on campaign materials. My heart started pounding. I moved closer to the door, pressing my ear against it. I know we need to be careful, David continued. If this gets out before the election, it will ruin everything. Yes, I understand what you need from me. 3 votes minimum plus my own. That gives you the majority you need to push through the new assessment fees. He was quiet for a moment, listening to whatever Linda was saying on the other end. Tomorrow works. Marcus has a client meeting in San Francisco, so he will be gone most of the day. Yes, I remember what you said about making it convincing. Linda, I just want to make sure we are clear about what happens after the election. You promised that once you get the votes secured, we can go public with everything. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Go public with what? What was David promising Linda? And what did she mean by making it convincing? That night I barely slept. David seemed completely normal, chatting about his day, asking about my upcoming trip to San Francisco. I played along, not letting on that I had heard anything. But inside, I was formulating a plan. The next morning, I made a show of leaving for San Francisco. I drove my car around the corner, parked on a side street, and walked back to our house through the greenbelt path that ran behind our neighborhood. I let myself in through the back door as quietly as possible and made my way to our bedroom, which had a clear view of the living room from the loft area. I set up my phone to record, angling it so it would capture the entire living room. Then I waited. Linda arrived at 10:30, dressed in a tight-fitting dress that was completely inappropriate for a casual HOA meeting. She carried a bottle of wine, which should have been my first clue that this was not going to be a standard planning session. David let her in, and I could see he had also dressed up more than usual. They settled on the couch, and Linda poured them each a glass of wine. So, have you thought more about our arrangement? Linda asked, crossing her legs in a way that made her dress ride up significantly. David took a sip of wine. I am still not entirely comfortable with this, Linda. Marcus is my husband. This feels like a huge betrayal. David, we have been over this. Linda moved closer to him, placing her hand on his knee. You want to be on the board, right? You want to have actual influence in this community instead of just being another resident who follows my rules, of course, but then you know what needs to happen. Her hand moved higher up his thigh. The board election is in 3 weeks. I need 4 guaranteed votes to maintain my presidency and push through the new special assessment. Gerald and Patricia are already with me, but Tom, Susan, and Jennifer are all challenging my authority. If you win one of the open seats and convince at least 2 other residents to vote for my slate, I will make sure you become treasurer. That is real power, David. And we are sure Marcus will not find out. David's voice wavered. Linda laughed, a calculated sound. Marcus is always traveling. He is never here. And even if he did suspect something, what is he going to do? We are not actually doing anything wrong. We are just making sure the right people understand what is at stake in this election. It feels like more than that, David said, but he did not move her hand away. David, you are an attractive man. Your husband does not appreciate you the way I do. Linda leaned in closer. I see how hard you work, how much you care about this community. You deserve to be recognized for that. And after the election, once I am secure as president for another term, we can talk about what comes next for us. My hands were shaking as I recorded this. I wanted to burst down there and confront them both, but something kept me hidden. I needed to see how far this would go. What about the other residents? David asked. How am I supposed to convince them to vote your way? Linda pulled out a folder from her bag. I have compiled files on everyone in the neighborhood, little violations here and there that I have been overlooking. The Johnsons have been parking their RV on the street one day past the allowed limit. The Patels painted their front door without getting approval. The Martinses have a garden gnome that violates our decorative standards. She smiled coldly. You are going to visit each household that I have identified and politely remind them that their violations could result in significant fines unless they vote correctly in the upcoming election. That is extortion, David said, though he sounded more awed than horrified. That is politics, darling. Linda set the folder on the coffee table and turned her full attention to David. Now, we need to make sure we are fully aligned on this, that we trust each other completely. She leaned in and kissed him. David hesitated for just a moment before kissing her back. My world tilted sideways as I watched my husband embrace another woman in our living room. The kiss deepened, and Linda's hands were all over him. I kept recording. Every second of it. Even though watching it felt like someone was taking a knife to my chest, I knew I needed evidence of everything that was happening. When they finally broke apart, Linda was smiling triumphantly. So, we have a deal. You will get me the votes I need, and in return, you get a board position, real influence, and after everything is settled, you and I can explore what this is between us without hiding. What about Marcus? David asked, and for a moment I hoped he was having second thoughts. What about him? Linda's voice was dismissive. He is never here anyway. You said yourself that you barely see him anymore. When was the last time you two actually connected? When was the last time he made you feel important? That stung because there was a grain of truth to it. My consulting work had been demanding lately. I had been traveling 3 weeks out of every month. But I had been doing it for us, to pay for the house David wanted in this neighborhood with its strict HOA rules and premium fees. You are right, David said quietly. Marcus is so focused on his career that he does not see what is happening right in front of him. Exactly. So do we have a deal? David nodded. We have a deal. They kissed again and I stopped recording. I had seen enough. My husband was not just having an affair. He was being manipulated into helping Linda maintain her power through what amounted to blackmail and extortion. And he was going along with it, whether out of ambition, loneliness, or genuine attraction to this toxic woman. I carefully backed out of the bedroom and made my way out of the house the same way I had come in. I sat in my car for a long time, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Part of me wanted to drive away and never come back. But a larger part, the part that was angry and hurt and righteously furious, wanted justice. I drove to Kevin's house. He took one look at my face and pulled me inside. What happened? I showed him the video. His expression darkened as he watched. This is worse than I thought, Kevin said when it finished. Linda is not just seducing David, she is using him to rig an HOA election and extort residents. Marcus, this is illegal. What she is describing is actual crimes. I know, I felt numb. I need to figure out what to do with this. Kevin thought for a moment. The HOA board answers to the residents, and there are specific laws in California about HOA governance. What Linda is planning violates multiple statutes. You could send this to the board members, but some of them are already in her pocket. She mentioned Gerald and Patricia were with her. Right. But Tom, Susan, and Jennifer are not. They are the ones challenging her. Kevin pulled out his laptop. We need to do this strategically. If you just blast this out to everyone, Linda will find a way to spin it or claim the video is fake. But if we present it to the right people, with context about the laws she is breaking, we can take her down properly. We spent the next several hours researching California HOA laws. What Linda had proposed violated several sections of the Davis-Sterling Common Interest Development Act, which governed HOAs in California. Using HOA violations as leverage to influence an election was a clear breach of fiduciary duty. And if she followed through on those threats, it could constitute extortion under California Penal Code Section 518. I drafted a detailed email explaining what I had discovered. I attached the video and included citations to the specific laws Linda was violating. Then I sent it to the 3 board members who were not aligned with Linda: Tom Richardson, Susan Alvarez, and Jennifer Wung. I also sent copies to our HOA's attorney and management company. Now what? I asked Kevin. Now you wait, and you need to decide what you are going to do about David. That was the harder question. I went home that evening with no idea what I was going to say to my husband. When I walked in, David was cooking dinner like nothing had happened. "Hey, how was San Francisco?" he asked cheerfully. "Fine, productive." I could not look at him without seeing Linda's hands on him, seeing him kiss her. "How was your day?" "Quiet. Just worked on some client accounts." Linda stopped by briefly to drop off more campaign materials. The lie came so easily to him, that might have hurt more than anything else. "David, we need to talk." Something in my tone made him turn around, his expression guarded. "About what?" "About you and Linda Morrison." His face went pale. "Marcus, I do not know what you think is happening, but I saw you." I pulled out my phone. I recorded everything. The wine, the kiss, the plan to extort our neighbors for votes, all of it. David sank into a chair. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, quietly, "How?" "I overheard you on the phone last night, so I pretended to leave this morning and came back to see what was really going on." I sat down across from him. "Why, David, why would you do this? You are never here." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I am alone in this house 90% of the time. Linda paid attention to me. She made me feel important, like I mattered." "So you decided to help her break the law and cheat on me?" "I was not cheating. We just kissed. Nothing else happened." "Yet, she made it pretty clear what she expected after the election." I shook my head. "But honestly, the affair is almost secondary to the fact that you agreed to help her extort our neighbors. Do you understand how serious that is?" David put his head in his hands. "What are you going to do?" "I already did it." I sent the video to the board members, the HOA attorney, and the management company. What happens next is out of my hands. "Marcus, you could have destroyed my reputation, my career, everything." I stood up. "You did that yourself. I just documented it." I slept in the guest room that night. Around 11, my phone started buzzing with emails and text messages. The board members were responding. Tom Richardson called it deeply disturbing and said he was calling an emergency board meeting. Susan Alvarez thanked me for bringing this to their attention and confirmed that what Linda had planned was illegal. Jennifer Wung said she had suspected Linda was corrupt but had never had proof before. The HOA attorney, a man named Richard Paulson, sent a formal email stating that he was advising the board to suspend Linda immediately pending an investigation. The management company echoed this recommendation. By morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Word had spread about the video, though I had not shared it publicly. Linda had apparently been contacted by the board and told not to come to the emergency meeting they had scheduled for that evening. I attended the meeting. So did about 60 other residents, which was unheard of for an HOA gathering. Usually, these meetings drew maybe 10 people at most. Tom Richardson, as vice president, chaired the meeting. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Tom began. "We are here to address serious allegations against our current president, Linda Morrison, regarding her conduct and planned actions concerning the upcoming board election." Linda was not present, but her attorney was, a sharp-faced woman named Deanne Fletcher, who stood up immediately. "My client denies any wrongdoing and believes this is a politically motivated attack designed to undermine her leadership." "We have video evidence," Susan Alvarez said calmly. "Would you like us to play it for everyone here?" Deanne's confidence faltered. "That video was obtained illegally. It cannot be used as evidence of anything." Richard Paulson, the HOA attorney, stood up. "Actually, in California, recording someone in your own home is perfectly legal, even without their consent. Marcus Chen had every right to record what happened in his living room. And the content of that recording shows clear evidence of plans to violate multiple HOA governance laws, as well as potential criminal extortion." The room erupted in conversation. Deanne tried to regain control. Even if the recording is admissible, it does not prove anything actually happened. It is just talk. Talk about using HOA violations as leverage to influence votes, Tom said. Talk about a quid pro quo arrangement involving a board position, and evidence of an inappropriate relationship with a married resident designed to secure his loyalty. These are serious breaches of Linda's fiduciary duty to this HOA. I move that we vote to remove Linda Morrison as president immediately, Jennifer Wong said. I second that motion, Susan added. The vote was swift and unanimous among the 4 board members present. Gerald and Patricia, Linda's allies, had not shown up to the meeting, which Tom noted for the record as suspicious. Furthermore, Richard Paulson said, I am recommending that the board file a complaint with the Sacramento District Attorney's Office regarding the planned extortion scheme. While it was not carried out, the planning and conspiracy to commit extortion is itself a crime under California law. That got everyone's attention. Residents started asking questions all at once. Would there be a criminal investigation? What would happen to the election? Who would be president now? Tom raised his hands for quiet. Let's take this one step at a time. First, as vice president, I will assume the duties of president until the election next month. Second, we will be conducting a full audit of all of Linda's decisions and finances to ensure there are no other irregularities. Third, the election will proceed as scheduled, but Linda Morrison is banned from running for any board position. And fourth, we will be implementing new transparency measures to prevent this kind of abuse of power in the future. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to me. Some thanked me for exposing Linda. Others asked uncomfortable questions about David's involvement. I kept my answers brief and vague. David's participation was humiliating enough without airing all the details publicly. When I got home, David was sitting in the dark living room. I heard what happened at the meeting, he said. Linda is finished, yes. Am I going to be arrested too? I had been thinking about that. I do not know. You did not actually follow through with extorting anyone, but you agreed to do it, which might be enough for conspiracy charges. The DA will decide. David was quiet for a long time. I am sorry, Marcus. I know that does not fix anything, but I am truly sorry. I was lonely and stupid and Linda manipulated me, but that does not excuse what I did. No, it does not. Do you want me to leave? I had been asking myself that question since yesterday. I do not know what I want right now. I need time to process everything. Over the next week, things moved quickly. The Sacramento District Attorney's Office opened an investigation into Linda Morrison. They interviewed me, reviewed the video, and spoke with other residents about Linda's general conduct as HOA president. What they discovered was worse than anyone had suspected. Linda had been skimming money from the HOA reserves for years. Small amounts, hidden in inflated contractor bills and fake maintenance expenses. The audit Tom ordered revealed that over $70,000 was missing. Linda had also been selectively enforcing rules to punish residents who opposed her and ignoring violations from her supporters, which was a breach of her fiduciary duty and could be considered discrimination under California law. The DA charged Linda with embezzlement, conspiracy to commit extortion, and breach of fiduciary duty. The embezzlement charge was the most serious, a felony carrying potential prison time. David was interviewed by investigators but was not charged. The DA apparently decided that he had been manipulated and had not actually committed any crimes beyond agreeing to something he never followed through on. But the experience terrified him, and I watched him become more withdrawn and depressed as the reality of what he had almost done sank in. Our marriage was on life support. We barely spoke beyond practical necessities. I moved all my things into the guest room permanently. Friends started asking if we were getting divorced, and I did not have an answer for them. Kevin thought I should leave. David chose to betray you, Marcus. Lonely or not, manipulated or not, he made a conscious choice to kiss that woman and agree to break the law. You do not owe him forgiveness. My sister Emily, who lived in Portland, thought I should try counseling. 8 years is a long time to throw away. If David is genuinely remorseful and willing to work on things, maybe you can rebuild. I did not know what I wanted. Part of me still loved David, the person I thought he was, but I did not know if I could ever trust him again. The HOA election happened as scheduled. Tom Richardson ran for president and won overwhelmingly. Susan and Jennifer kept their board seats. 2 new members were elected, both of whom ran on platforms of transparency and accountability. The new board immediately implemented term limits for the president position and required monthly financial reports to be posted on the HOA website. Linda's trial was scheduled for 4 months later. Her attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA was not interested. The embezzlement charge alone carried a potential sentence of 3 years in prison, and the DA wanted to make an example of HOA corruption. I attended the trial. David did not. Seeing Linda in court, looking diminished and desperate, gave me no satisfaction. I just felt tired. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Bank records showing the embezzled funds, testimony from contractors who had been asked to inflate invoices, and my video, which was played for the jury and showed Linda's manipulative tactics and her casual attitude toward breaking the law. Linda's defense tried to argue that the embezzlement was poor accounting rather than intentional theft, but the jury did not buy it. They convicted her on all charges after just 3 hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced Linda to 2 years in state prison, 5 years of probation, and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA plus additional fines. It was a harsh sentence, but the judge said he was troubled by Linda's complete lack of remorse and her abuse of the trust residents had placed in her. After the sentencing, I ran into Deanne Fletcher, Linda's attorney, outside the courthouse. "Your video destroyed my client's life," she said bitterly. "Linda destroyed her own life," I replied. "I just made sure other people knew about it." That night, David was waiting for me when I got home. He looked like he had been crying. "I watched the news coverage of the sentencing," he said. "Marcus, I keep thinking about how close I came to being on trial beside her. If you had not stopped this, I would have gone through with it. I would have threatened our neighbors, helped her rig the election, and probably ended up facing criminal charges too." "Probably," I agreed. "I have been seeing a therapist." David's voice shook. "Trying to understand why I was so willing to throw away everything we built together, why I let Linda manipulate me so easily. And what has the therapist said? That I have been dealing with depression and loneliness for a long time. That I was vulnerable to someone who made me feel important and seen. But also that none of that excuses my choices or means you have to forgive me." I sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. "I do not know if I can forgive you, David. Every time I look at you, I see you kissing her. I see you agreeing to break the law. I see someone I do not recognize. I know." David sat down across from me, maintaining distance. "I have destroyed your trust and I may never get it back, but I want to try. I want to be the person you thought you married. I have already told my therapist I will do whatever it takes, individual therapy, couples therapy, whatever you need. Why should I believe you will actually change? Because losing you is worse than anything Linda promised me. Because I finally understand what I gave up for a fantasy that was never real." David's eyes were red. "But I also understand if it is too late. If you have already decided you are done, I will accept that. I will move out, we will figure out the divorce, and I will live with the consequences of what I did." I thought about that. About starting over, finding a new place to live, dividing up 8 years of shared life. About the grief and anger and loss that would come with ending our marriage. But I also thought about the grief and anger I was already feeling, living in the same house with someone I could not trust. "I need more time," I finally said. "I am not ready to decide anything permanent right now, but I also cannot go back to how things were before. I understand." We agreed to start couples therapy. It was awkward and painful, dredging up years of resentment and neglect on both sides. My work travel had left David feeling abandoned and unimportant. David's desire to please others had made him vulnerable to manipulation. We had stopped communicating about the things that mattered and had let our relationship coast on autopilot. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Sarah Owens, did not pull punches. "You both contributed to creating an environment where this affair could happen," she told us in one session. "Marcus, your absence created a void. David, you chose to fill that void with someone toxic instead of talking to your husband about your needs. Both of you have work to do if this marriage is going to survive." It was not the comfort I wanted. I wanted Dr. Owens to say that David was entirely at fault, that I was the wronged party with no responsibility. But relationships were more complicated than that. Slowly, over months, we started rebuilding. David cut back on his client load to have more structured work hours. I negotiated with my firm to reduce my travel to 1 week per month maximum. We instituted a weekly date night, something we had not done in years. We talked more about everything from minor annoyances to deep fears. It was not easy. There were setbacks. Times when I would remember the video and feel a surge of anger so intense I had to leave the room. Times when David would withdraw into depression and I would have to decide whether to reach out or give him space. But we kept showing up to therapy, kept trying. The HOA under Tom's leadership was transformed. He implemented quarterly town halls where residents could voice concerns directly to the board. Financial statements were posted online monthly. The rules were enforced fairly and consistently, without favoritism or retaliation. Several residents who had been planning to move because of Linda's toxicity decided to stay. Gerald and Patricia, Linda's allies on the old board, resigned quietly. Tom appointed 2 new members who were committed to transparent governance. The neighborhood felt different, lighter somehow, without the constant low-level anxiety of arbitrary rule enforcement. I ran into Tom at the community pool one Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after Linda's conviction. "I never got to properly thank you," Tom said. "What you did took real courage. A lot of people suspected Linda was corrupt, but no one had the evidence or the guts to stand up to her." "I was not trying to be heroic," I said. "I was just trying to protect my husband from making a terrible mistake. The HOA stuff was secondary." "Still. You changed this whole community for the better. People actually like living here now instead of just tolerating it." That felt good to hear. My actions had consequences beyond just my marriage. They had freed an entire neighborhood from a petty tyrant who had abused her power for years. David and I marked our 6th wedding anniversary quietly, with dinner at home. We had talked about whether to even acknowledge it, given everything that had happened. But Dr. Owens encouraged us to honor the good parts of our relationship, the history we shared, even while working through the damage. "I know this year was not what either of us planned," David said over dessert. "But I am grateful you gave me a chance to make things right. A lot of people would not have." "I am not sure I have made the right choice yet," I admitted. "Some days I still think about leaving, but I am choosing to stay today, and that is enough for now." That is all I can ask for. We heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Linda was not adjusting well to prison. She had filed multiple appeals, all of which were denied. Her ex-husbands wanted nothing to do with her. Her adult children had apparently cut off contact, embarrassed by the scandal. She had gone from being the most powerful person in our community to being completely isolated, and according to reports, she still did not understand how her own actions had led to her downfall. Part of me felt sorry for her. But mostly, I felt relieved that she could not hurt anyone else. Jennifer Wung, one of the board members, organized a neighborhood barbecue to celebrate the HOA's new chapter. Nearly every household attended. There was a genuine sense of community that had been missing before, when everyone was too worried about violating some obscure rule to relax and enjoy their neighbors. Kevin found me by the grill, flipping burgers. "How are things with you and David?" he asked quietly. "Better." "Not perfect, but better." I watched David across the yard, laughing at something Tom was saying. We are learning how to be married again, if that makes sense, like we are dating but with 8 years of history. Does he know how lucky he is that you stayed? I think so. But I also know I am lucky he is willing to do the work to change. A lot of people would have just made excuses or blamed Linda for everything. The HOA's annual meeting that fall was remarkably boring, which everyone agreed was a wonderful thing. The budget was approved without controversy. The new board members gave updates on long-delayed maintenance projects that Linda had been ignoring. Residents asked normal questions about landscaping and parking without fear of retaliation. "This is what an HOA is supposed to be," Susan Alvarez said during the meeting. "A group of neighbors working together to maintain our community, not a dictatorship run by someone on a power trip." Everyone applauded that sentiment. David did not run for the board. We had both agreed that after everything that happened, it was better for him to stay out of HOA politics entirely. He seemed relieved by that decision, like it lifted a weight he had not realized he was carrying. Instead, David channeled his desire to be involved in the community into organizing a neighborhood watch program. It was something helpful and constructive that did not involve the toxic power dynamics that had gotten him into trouble with Linda. He was good at it, too, creating a text chain and schedule that made everyone feel safer without being overbearing. I found myself actually enjoying living in Riverside Meadows again. The house that had felt like a prison of bad memories started to feel like home. David and I repainted the living room, erasing the space where Linda had sat and manipulated him. We bought new furniture, symbolically creating a fresh start. Dr. Owens eventually suggested we reduce our therapy sessions from weekly to bi-weekly, then monthly. "You two have done the work," she said. "You have rebuilt trust and communication. You do not need me as much anymore." That felt like a milestone. We were not just surviving anymore, we were actually healing. One evening, almost a year after I had recorded that video, David and I were sitting on our back patio watching the sunset. It was one of those perfect California evenings, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze. "Do you ever wish you had handled things differently?" David asked suddenly. "That you had confronted me privately instead of sending the video to the board." I thought about that. Sometimes, it would have been easier on both of us, but Linda needed to be stopped and a private confrontation would not have done that. She would have convinced you I was overreacting, or she would have found a different resident to manipulate. The only way to really stop her was to expose her publicly. You are probably right. I just hate that our marriage problems became neighborhood drama. Our marriage problems became neighborhood drama because you got involved with the HOA president in a scheme to break the law, I reminded him gently. That was not on me, David nodded, accepting that. Fair point. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then David said, I am glad you did not give up on us, even when you had every reason to. I am glad you did not give me more reasons to, I replied. It was not a fairy tale ending. We were not magically back to perfect happiness, but we were honest with each other in a way we had not been before. We were intentional about our relationship instead of taking it for granted, and we were both committed to making sure nothing like the Linda situation ever happened again. The HOA continued to thrive under Tom's leadership. Property values in Riverside Meadows actually increased because the neighborhood became known as a well-managed community, rather than one run by a petty tyrant. Several real estate agents started specifically marketing homes in our development, touting the transparent governance and community atmosphere. I sometimes wondered what my life would look like if I had not come home early that day, if I had not overheard David's phone call, if I had not set up my phone to record. Would David have gone through with Linda's plan? Would he have eventually left me for her? Would the HOA have continued to suffer under her corrupt leadership? There was no way to know. I could only deal with what actually happened and the choices I made in response. Kevin told me I should write a book about the whole experience. People love HOA horror stories, he said. And yours has everything: corruption, betrayal, secret recordings, justice served. It is like a movie. I lived it, I said. I do not need to relive it by writing it down, but I did sometimes share the story when people asked why I had such strong opinions about HOA governance. It became a cautionary tale about unchecked power and the importance of transparency in community organizations. Linda was released from prison after serving 18 months with good behavior. I heard she moved to Nevada to live with a cousin, far away from Sacramento and the neighborhood she had once ruled. I did not wish her ill, but I did not wish her well either. I just wanted her to be someone else's problem, someone else's concern. The neighborhood gradually stopped talking about the scandal. New residents moved in who had never heard of Linda Morrison and did not care about HOA drama from before they arrived. The board continued to function well, with competitive but fair elections and reasonable policies. David and I found our rhythm. We celebrated our 7th anniversary with a trip to Napa Valley, something we used to do regularly but had stopped because we were too busy. We laughed more. We touched more. We remembered why we had fallen in love in the first place. Do you trust me again? David asked me one night as we were getting ready for bed. I considered the question carefully. I trust that you learned from what happened. I trust that you are committed to our marriage. I trust that you would not make the same mistakes again. I paused. But do I trust you the way I did before? No, and I do not know if I ever will completely. Some things, once broken, never fit back together quite the same way. David looked sad but not surprised. I understand, and I will keep working to earn that trust back even if it takes the rest of our lives. That is all I can ask for. We turned off the lights and lay in bed, David's arm around me in a position that had become familiar again after months of sleeping apart. "Marcus," he said quietly in the dark. "Yeah, thank you for saving me from myself. I know you did not do it for me, but you still saved me from destroying my life. I will never forget that." I did not respond, just squeezed his hand to acknowledge I had heard him, because he was right. I had not done it for him. I had done it to stop Linda and protect our community. But the fact that it also saved David from prison and a criminal record was a side benefit I was grateful for, even if I did not say it out loud. The seasons changed. Sacramento's hot summers gave way to mild falls and cool winters. Life continued in Riverside Meadows, now just a normal suburban neighborhood with a functional HOA and residents who were not living in fear of their leadership. I reduced my travel even more, taking a senior position at my consulting firm that was more strategic and less hands-on. It meant slightly less money but significantly more time at home. David and I used that time to reconnect, to build the kind of relationship we should have had all along. We took up hiking together, exploring trails in the Sierra Nevada foothills. We started cooking together instead of grabbing takeout. We made friends with other couples in the neighborhood, including Tom and his wife Rachel, who became close confidants. "You two seem really happy," Rachel observed one evening when the four of us were having dinner at their house. "Given everything you went through, that is impressive. We worked for it," I said simply. "Happiness did not just happen, we had to rebuild it from the ground up." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "Linda did a lot of damage to a lot of people, but I think she inadvertently made this community stronger. We learned what happens when we do not pay attention to who has power over us. We learned that silence enables corruption. And some of us," he glanced meaningfully at David, "learned personal lessons about integrity and loyalty." David shifted uncomfortably but did not argue. He had become better at accepting accountability for his actions, even when it was uncomfortable. As the 2-year anniversary of the recording approached, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. Linda was out of prison but broken. David and I were still married but different. The HOA was functional but transformed. Nothing was the same as it had been, and that was both sad and necessary. I thought about the version of myself who had set up that phone to record, hands shaking with anger and hurt. That Marcus had been terrified of what he might discover, but brave enough to face it anyway. He had been willing to blow up his life for the truth, even though he did not know if he would survive the explosion. I was grateful to that Marcus. He had made hard choices that led to justice and accountability, even though it cost him dearly. Because of him, dozens of families lived in a better community. Because of him, a corrupt official faced consequences. And because of him, David had a chance to become a better person instead of descending into criminality alongside Linda. "What are you thinking about?" David asked, coming up behind me where I stood looking out our living room window. "Everything that happened here," I gestured to the couch where Linda had sat, though it was long gone, "and everything that has happened since. Do you regret how you handled it?" I turned to face him. "No, I regret that it had to happen at all. I regret that you made the choices that put us in that position. But once we were there, I handled it the only way I could. I told the truth and let the consequences unfold." David nodded slowly. "For what it is worth, I do not regret that you recorded it. If you had just confronted me, Linda would have convinced me you were paranoid. She was good at manipulation. But seeing myself on that video, seeing how easily I betrayed you and agreed to break the law, that was a wake-up call nothing else could have been. I am glad something good came from it." We stood there together, looking out at the neighborhood that had been the center of so much drama. Children were playing in the street, neighbors were chatting by their mailboxes. Everything looked peaceful and normal, the way suburban life was supposed to be. "We should probably get going," David said, checking his watch. "We are supposed to meet Kevin and his boyfriend for dinner in an hour." "Right." I grabbed my jacket from the hall closet. "Did you remember to make the reservation? Of course, I am not completely unreliable." The comment was said with humor, but it carried an undercurrent of the work David had done to become more dependable and present. He kept track of plans now. He showed up on time. He did what he said he would do. Small things that rebuilt trust incrementally. At dinner, Kevin asked if I had heard that Linda's appeal had been officially denied by the state Supreme Court. "I saw something about that," I confirmed. "She is out of legal options now." "Good," Kevin said firmly. "She deserves everything she got." "I know you are more forgiving than me, Marcus, but that woman tried to destroy multiple people's lives for her own power and profit." "I am not forgiving," I corrected. "I just do not spend energy thinking about Linda anymore. She is not part of my life or my community. She is irrelevant." "That is fair." Kevin's boyfriend Chris, who had heard the story several times, shook his head. "I still cannot believe someone would risk prison to rig an HOA election. Like, the stakes are so low in the grand scheme of things." "The stakes were not low to Linda," David said quietly. Being HOA president was her entire identity. She had no career, no real relationships, no hobbies. Just the power she held over the neighborhood. Losing that meant losing everything. It was an insightful observation, and I was struck by how much David had grown in his ability to understand people's motivations without excusing their actions. Therapy had been good for him in ways that extended beyond our marriage. The conversation moved to lighter topics. Kevin's boyfriend's new job, an upcoming vacation Tom and Rachel were planning, a new restaurant opening downtown. Normal life stuff that had nothing to do with HOAs or scandals or betrayal. Later, as David and I drove home, he said, "I like who we are now. Even knowing what it took to get here, I like the people we have become." "Me too," I admitted. "I just wish we could have become these people without all the pain." Maybe we could not have. Maybe we needed to break before we could rebuild into something stronger. It was a nice thought, romantic even. I was not sure I entirely believed it, but I understood the impulse to find meaning in suffering, to believe that everything happened for a reason. The truth was simpler and less comforting. Bad things happened because people made bad choices, and sometimes those bad choices created opportunities for change. Linda chose corruption and manipulation. David chose betrayal and poor judgment. I chose truth and consequences. And all of those choices together created the reality we now lived in. As we pulled into our driveway, I noticed the house lights glowing warmly in the evening darkness. This house that had witnessed so much pain and drama now looked like simply a home, a place where two people were figuring out how to love each other better. "Hey, David," I said as we got out of the car. "Yeah, I am glad we are doing this. The work, the therapy, all of it. I am glad we did not give up." He smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen from him all day. "Me too, Marcus, me too." We went inside together, closing the door on the past and choosing, once again, to build a future together. It was not perfect, and it never would be. But it was real and honest and ours, and after everything we had been through, that was more than enough.